Welcome to the K through 2nd online Back to School Boot Camp 2020 with Julia Hampton Morgan Memorial Library.
Hey everyone, I'm Sarah with the Alabama Department of Archives and History. We're located in downtown Montgomery across from the state capitol. Today we are going to learn about the first Alabamians. We'll talk about where they lived, how they got their food, and what tools they would have used long ago. You may be wondering, how do we know so much about these first people? It all starts with an artifact. An artifact is something made or used by man, like arrowheads, pottery, or even ceremonial items. These artifacts are clues into how these people lived. It's almost like they're telling the story of these people who lived long ago. So for today, let's take a journey back in time and learn more about the first Alabamians.
Hi, I'm Victoria, and the first group we're going to talk about today are the Paleo Indians. The Paleo Indians lived in the land that we now know as Alabama from 12,000 to 8,000 BC, and they were nomadic. Nomadic means that they moved around. They didn't just live in one place. And part of the reason they did that is because they hunted animals who also moved around. Animals like deer, bison, and mastodons. They hunted them for food and also to use their skins to make clothes to keep them warm. And they used a few different weapons to do this. One weapon was the spear, which is a long stick with a point on the end, but they also used a special tool to help them throw their spears. That tool was called an atlatl, and this is what an atlatl looked like. You'll notice it's flat on one end and it's curved on the other so that it can fit onto the back of a spear. It would be weighted with something like rocks on one side to make it a little heavier, and using the atlatl, the Paleo Indians were able to throw their spears further and harder than they could without one. So this was an important tool that they used to help them in their hunting. The next group we're going to talk about are the descendants of the Paleo Indians, the Archaic Indians. So the Archaic Indians are related to the Paleo Indians, they just came after them. And the Archaic Indians lived from 8,000 to 1,000 BC. They were semi-nomadic. That means that they moved around for part of the year, but the rest of the year they lived in one place, like a cave. They used some of the same tools and weapons that the Paleo Indians used, like the spear and the atlatl, but they also used some new stone tools, like projectile points. Projectile points are sharpened pieces of rock or stone that were used as knives or as the ends of spears. The Archaic Indians also used stone bowls. This is an example of a soapstone bowl. It would have taken a really long time to carve this bowl out of a rock, but once it was carved out, it could be used to hold water or food. It was probably really heavy though, so when the Archaic Indians moved, they wouldn't have taken it with them. They also used special rocks called grinding stones. These were used to grind down food like nuts, berries, and seeds into flour, or just to make them easier to eat. And this is an activity that you can do at home. So we've got a grinding stone here, and we've just got a little bit of dried corn on it, but you can grind up whatever kind of food you want. What you want to do is put that on one of your stones, and then take a smaller rock in both hands, put pressure on it, and twist. And over time, if you're grinding down corn, you'll get cornmeal, which is what tortilla chips are made out of. The next group that we're going to talk about are the Woodland Indians. The Woodland Indians are the descendants of the Archaic Indians, and they lived from 1000 BC to 1000 AD. And they were a little bit different than their ancestors. Instead of moving around for part of the year, the Woodland Indians lived in villages in small houses called huts. They also had some new innovations. One of these was a new kind of weapon, the bow and arrow. And you'll notice this bow is pretty tall. That's because a bow was usually crafted to measure the same length as a person's arm span. So if you had long arms, you'd have a really tall bow too. And using the bow and arrow for hunting gave the Woodland Indians more accuracy. Another innovation that they had was in pottery. Instead of making their bowls out of stone, the Woodland Indians used clay. Clay was easier to make, it didn't take quite as long, and clay pottery is lighter, so you could carry it around with you. And once they were making their clay pottery, they would use different tools to decorate it. Tools like antlers, seashells, or even corn cobs. And this is another activity that you can do at home as well. On the Archives website, we have a recipe for clay that you can make at home, or you can just use Play-Doh if that's what you have. Maybe you can't find tools quite like this, but maybe you can find something else in your backyard that you can use to personalize and decorate your pottery too. And over here, we have some examples of woodland Indian clay pottery. We have vessels of lots of different sizes and shapes, and there were different tools that were used to decorate them. Some of them were even decorated just using fingernails, so there's lots of different tools that they could use. All right, well next, Christian is going to tell you about our next Native American civilization.
Hi everyone, I'm Christian, and today we're going to talk about the Mississippians. This was the most advanced Native American group in Alabama at this time. These people lived from about 1000 to 1500, and during that time they established a very unique culture. And we're going to learn a little bit about it today. Now over here we have a model of a Mississippian village. You can see different aspects of this village, including the flat top hill in the background that they would call a mound, and the wall or palisade surrounding this village. Now these are different aspects of their culture, and it shows that they've established something unique. For example, this wall surrounding there isn't just for protection, it's also to show that these people think of themselves as one set community. They're different from the people outside of that wall. Now also you might have noticed some crops growing outside the wall. And these crops would provide the food for the Mississippians. The three main vegetables that they would eat would be corn, beans, and squash. And if you look at this mural here, you can see some people farming those vegetables. It's mostly the women as well. If you look up here, you can see men providing food, but they're not growing crops, they're instead carrying a fish. And that's because the men were thought of as hunters and fishermen in their culture, while the women were thought as workers of the earth. And so you see there starts to be set roles in this society. And these set roles reflect a greater culture, one that is growing to immense size. It wasn't just here in Alabama. If you look at this map over here, you can actually see settlements all the way in Florida to the south and all the way up north to the Great Lakes in the north. And so what we're seeing is a culture that spread far beyond the Mississippi area into most of the eastern United States, or what would be the United States. Another aspect of their culture would be their religion. And if you look at this painting that we have on the wall, you'll notice that this is a much more elaborate religion than their ancestors. They have elaborate cloths and feathers all over them and jewelry, and this was supposed to show their social status. These people are a priest and a priestess, so they're held to a kind of higher status than some of their other citizens. If you look, we actually have some examples of the jewelry they would wear as well, carved out of shell, and metal, and stone. And it's carved with these religious symbols that were meant to not just show their status, but also help communicate with the spirit world. Now down here we also have some pottery that would be used in ceremonial events. And this pottery we're looking at is mostly effigy pottery. And what that means is that it is designed to look like living beings, whether it's animals or humans. Now below all that, we can also see the rattlesnake disc. This is probably the most iconic religious artifact of these people. It has two entwined rattlesnakes wrapped around a hand with an eye in it. Now that's what we would call a God's eye, and it's meant to be an opening into the spirit world. But this is not the last time that these people would use stones in their society. They would also use stone discs for things like Chunky, a game that has both recreational benefit and practical benefit. The game of Chunky was very popular with all Mississippians. It was played in slightly different ways depending on what village you were in, but the general idea was this. Take a stone that's smooth and round, roll it on the ground, and have different players try to hit it with their spears. Now when they do this, they're trying to hit as close as possible to that stone. If you can hit the stone, it proves that you can hit a target that's fast and small, which means you're probably a good hunter. Now we're actually going to play our own game of Chunky today. I have a ball instead of a chunky stone that we're going to use, and I have Victoria over here who is carrying beanbags. She's going to be our spear thrower today. So I'll roll this ball on the ground. She's going to try and hit it. If she gets a direct hit on the ball, let's say that's 2 points. If she gets close to it, let's say that's 1 point. If she misses, that's 0 points. Now, I'm gonna roll the ball whenever you're ready. You good? All right. Okay, that's 1. All right, so 1 point would be awarded to Victoria then. You can change the scoring if you want to, and you can get as many friends as you want to play, as long as you have the things to throw and the things to try to throw at. Thank you, Victoria. Now, Chunky is not the only game these people would play. They had many other games that they held dear to their heart, but one of them would be the game of stickball. And even the descendants of the Mississippians, the people that came after them, played stickball as well. And although we've mostly learned about these people through the artifacts they've left behind, they also left behind stories that they passed down from generation to generation, from child to child, from year to year. And so what we're going to do next is listen to a story from Kelly, and she'll tell you a story about an important stickball game.
Hi there, I'm Kelly. And like Christian was saying, the Southeastern Indians used storytelling as a way to pass down the traditions of their culture from generation to generation. Oftentimes they had animals as the main characters, and sometimes they answered the question of how things came to be. So I have a story I'd like to read to you today. It's a Muskogee story, and it's about a contest between the birds and the animals. So this is called The Great Ball Game. It's a Muskogee story. It was retold by Joseph Bouchek and illustrated by Susan L. Roth. Long ago, the birds and animals had a great argument. "We who have wings are better than you," said the birds. "That is not so," the animals replied. "We who have teeth are better." The two sides argued back and forth. Their quarrel went on until it seemed they would go to war because of it. Then Crane, the leader of the birds, and Bear, the leader of the animals, had an idea. "Let us have a ball game," Crane said. "The first side to score a goal will win the argument." "This idea is good," said Bear. "The side that loses will have to accept the penalty given by the other side." So they walked and flew to a field, and there they divided up into 2 teams. On one side went all those who had wings. They were the birds. On the other side went those with teeth. They were the animals. But when the teams were formed, one creature was left out, Bat. He had wings and teeth. He flew back and forth between the 2 sides. First he went to the animals. "I have teeth," he said. "I must be on your side." But Bear shook his head. "It would not be fair," he said. "You have wings. You must be a bird." So Bat flew to the other side. "Take me," he said to the birds, "for you see, I have wings." But the birds laughed at him. "You are too little to help us. We don't want you," they jeered. Then Bat went back to the animals. "Please let me join your team," he begged them. "The birds laughed at me and would not accept me." So Bear took pity on the little bat. "You're not very big," said Bear, "but sometimes even the small ones can help. We will accept you as an animal, but you must hold back and let the bigger animals play first." 2 poles were set up as the goalposts at each end of the field. Then the game began. Each team played hard. On the animal side, Fox and Deer were swift runners, and Bear cleared the way for them as they played. Crane and Hawk, though, were even swifter, and they stole the ball each time before the animals could reach their goal. Soon it became clear that the birds had the advantage. Whenever they got the ball, they would fly up into the air, and animals could not reach them. The animals guarded their goal well, but they grew tired as the sun began to set. Just as the sun sank below the horizon, Crane took the ball and flew toward the poles. Bear tried to stop him, but stumbled in the dim light and fell. It seemed as if the birds would surely win. Suddenly, a small dark shape flew out onto the field and stole the ball from Crane just as he was about to reach the poles. It was Bat. He darted from side to side across the field, for he did not need light to find his way. None of the birds could catch him or block him. Holding the ball, Bat flew right between the poles at the other end. The animals had won. This is how Bat came to be accepted as an animal. He was allowed to set the penalty for the birds. "You birds," Bat said, "must leave this land for half of each year." So it is that the birds fly south each winter. And every day at dusk, Bat still comes flying to see if the animals need him to play ball. The end. So, according to this Muskogee story, the reason that the birds fly south for the winter is because the animals won the ball game. So thank you so much for joining us today. We really hope you enjoyed learning about the first Alabamians. And for you adults out there, please make sure you visit the Alabama Department of Archives and History's website for more information. And for more resources related to Alabama history for both adults and kids, make sure you visit the newest website, Alabama History at Home, at www.alabamahistoryhome.org. So, on behalf of all of us here in the education section at the Alabama Department of Archives and History, I'd like to say, stay safe out there. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks for watching the K through 2nd graders online Back to School Boot Camp 2020 with Julia Hampton Morgan Memorial